the current corporate model, for investors to make capital gains on their investment, they need for consumption to go up. But that's because they're investing equity within a functional enterprise. If we financed our places, so if we financed a county or a state with equity, then people would make money on that place reducing consumption. So the notion that consumption is necessary to keep a capitalist model going is complete bunk. It's just not true. It's a complete lie. If we finance places with equity, then in fact, investors could make a fortune on reducing consumption and healing the environment. So if that's not happening, it's because clearly, again, that's going to be more decentralizing. I'm presuming that at some point Mr. Global is going to want to do that before he introduces new technology, because that's how he optimizes the profit he makes on it. But the notion that we have to have collapse, or that we have to have, that capitalism or the economy needs more consumption, it's just not true. I mean, it's just not true.
Catherine, no big picture question here, but I was curious from your first interview with Cliff, you stated, when I was on Wall Street, I worked with an insurance company that was doing research on whether or not memories come from the future. Could you elaborate on this statement and or tell us what they found?
I have no idea. I was at a meeting of an organization that sort of brings together people from different financial institutions, and it was a very capable young researcher who worked it was a Scandinavian insurance company, and he started telling me about the research that he was doing, and I never followed up. So I really don't know, but what was interesting is it was clear to me that they took it quite seriously. So, and I thought it was fascinating.
Yes.
But I really can't tell you much more than that.
Well, I thought I'd ask because it was interesting to me too, considering we're the WebBot forum here. Well, okay, I'm going to move on to what just about every one of us had a question on, which is the slow burn. And what we got here next is I've maintained for years now that your slow burn scenario would continue to be correct up until the day it wasn't anymore. As a longtime subscriber to Half Past Human Reports, what is your current opinion of Cliff's work?
I have a very high opinion of Cliff's work. I think there's nothing, more useful than kind of mapping out. It's what I call, one of my favorite writers is a guy named Michael Ventura, and he called it the psychic storm. And I think Cliff is mapping out a lot of what people are thinking and hoping and concerned about, and that's invaluable information. Now, I also feel that of course, people don't have a good understanding of how things work now, the way they work. And in fact, we have, one of the debates, somebody just posted a question up on the Solera report saying, Cliff High was adamant that you were wrong about the slow burn and the dollar was going to collapse shortly, and have you extracted an apology from him? But there's always been this debate, and I've always believed that collapse is not a global shared phenomena, as a lot of people have thought it would be. We've seen enormous amounts of collapse over the last 20 years, but they've been sort of managed and isolated. So Argentina is collapsing, or Russia's collapsing, or New Orleans is collapsing, but it's not a global shared experience. It's kind of sequential and managed. So there's plenty of collapse going on. It's just a different kind of collapse. And I think when I read sort of what Cliff aggregates and writes with Half Past Human, my sense is it represents an extraordinary ignorance in the sort of body politic about how the current financial system has worked in the past and works now, and hopefully, I'm hoping that will change. But so I think his work is invaluable, and I think the reading he's getting is quite sincere. but I've always felt that he was mapping out people's feelings based on their common understanding of sort of their official reality about how the financial system works, as opposed to how I think it really works. But I should say, I agree with you. It's if slow burn continues, or let me say it this way: the people who run the plan and have the power to slow burn this thing the whole way. Because what you're doing is you're subsidizing capital and offsetting that by devaluing and extracting subsidy from labor. And you can continue that process ad infinitum as long as you're willing to depopulate or kill enough people. I mean, that's, kind of what war is. It's the ultimate deflation. And so they have the power to slow burn this thing the whole way. And in my mind, there's no economic reason why they can't. The reality is, do they want to, number one, but number two, it's a big plan and it takes a lot of coordination, and I think at some point the sort of evilness of what's going on makes it hard to keep the slow burn together. The politics of just the leadership managing is extremely difficult. So there are many scenarios where the slow burn doesn't continue, and I agree in theory it could work until it works, and then boom, suddenly it doesn't work. And I think day to day, I'm an investment advisor, and one of the most important questions I ask myself constantly every day throughout the day is, what are the probabilities of a slow burn continuing this year versus another 2008 versus collapse? And my feeling for my clients is it's impossible to know what the future brings. If anything, the future should be invented, not predicted. But, I like them to organize their affairs so that they're going to be successful no matter which scenario it is. And I think they have to be prepared, even though I don't think there's a big chance of a global collapse. I do think there's a chance, but I also think that collapse for any one of us, could come for a variety of different reasons, including weather and space phenomena where we are. So we need to be prepared for it. So I think the WebBot project on this topic is invaluable. And what I would love to see, both with Cliff and many others of us who talk about different scenarios, is why so often, various folks have predicted that the dollar would collapse and it hasn't. And I think it's by looking into that phenomena that I've really come to believe and understand a slow burn. And one reason was, I thought that there was profound reasons for collapse in the late 90s because I'd had a chance to look deeply into the black budget. But one of the things I had the personal opportunity to do just because of my own personal experiences really experience the phenomenal centralized control of digital communications and technology, and consequently just the astounding control that the folks who run the centralized team have of individuals and counties and communities. It's quite remarkable. I mean, the extent of the invisible surveillance and digital control and influence is just far greater than most people realize. There really is a matrix.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm not sure I have much faith in binary money, but that's an excellent answer. Thank you very much.
Hi, Catherine. This is Green Meadow.
Hi.
Partially answered this question already. I want to thank you for your slow burn explanation about what's really going on with the economy. Of all the prognosticators that we've had, the slow burn seems to be the most accurate theory, and that's been very useful. But now I'm wondering, as the slow burn plays out, what's the end game? Where are we going?
Well, the logical there are a couple places the end game can go, or let's just look at this economically. There are three things you can do. You can the slow burn can continue forever if, one, you integrate new technology, so new energy and healthcare technology. Two, you depopulate significantly. Or three, you transform the economic and investment model, or a combination of the three. So if you look, for example, at the technology that I believe to be existent but not integrated, you could radically reduce the cost of energy on planet Earth, and you could radically reduce the cost of health care, certainly in the United States and in Europe. So that's number one. Number two, of course, is depopulation. That's obvious. The third is if we change the economic model. I talked last night about the fact that the theory that we need more consumption to keep capitalism going is a complete bunch of hooey. If we financed places with equity, people could make huge and hideous capital gains, reducing consumption and integrating new technology. So if you literally change the investment model, I'm happy to go into it in great detail, but if you change the investment model, you can absolutely re-optimize the economy in many respects and build an economic model where people have tremendous incentive to behave in environmentally responsive ways. I mean, peace can make a lot more money than war. So there are a couple ways to get there now. If you look at the trajectory they're on, I can only assume what they're doing is using they're planning on depopulation. So because if you're Mr. Global and you're running this thing, the simplest way to do it is to depopulate. I mean, that's the least risky strategy from your standpoint, though. Integrating new technology is more tricky. Now, one of my theories, and it's only a theory, but it's the only logical explanation I can come up with, is if you look at the politics of trying to patent life and to control the seed and food supply and introduce GMO seeds, if you sort of step back and study that whole phenomena over the last 20 years, my conclusion is that Mr. Global clearly doesn't believe that oil will continue to back the reserve currency, and he needs a replacement. He needs an asset that can back a new global currency, particularly a digital one, and so oil is going to go the way of all flesh, and that's why food has become, and the seed supply and control of the seed supply has become so important, and that's why the press to really get that adopted globally is so ferocious right now. If that's the case, if that theory has any merit, then it looks to me like they may be bringing in that new energy technology, and sooner rather than later. And if that's the case, that's going to reshuffle the whole economic deck, in just incredible ways. I always say, has anybody here seen the documentary Phoenix Lights?
I haven't.
Okay, well, I recommend it to you. It's a documentary made by a doctor in Phoenix who, I guess she filmed it from her balcony. There's this huge spaceship that sort of rolled down the eastern side of Arizona, and it's quite phenomenal. And one of my more famous quotes was a group of luminaries in the financial blogosphere were talking about the dollar was going to crash shortly. This was last year. And finally one of them said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think the dollar is going to do whatever the guy who owns that spaceship wants it to do." Because I'm a believer that it's the military that holds that sets the value of the dollar. And part of that is through the control of the oil as sort of as the backed asset. But whatever that spaceship was about, I can assure you it wasn't running on fuel that it got at the local ExxonMobil station. So if you look at the technology that appears to be available, the energy technology that appears to be available, in which a number of scientists have attested to, if they start to integrate that, then all bets are off. We're in for pretty radical change. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. So to me, it kind of sounds like if the powers that be stay in charge, they're probably headed down the depopulation route, and there's a possibility they'll go down the new technology route if they can control it.